Now let's make another file that's going to combine all the statuses so that we can show them just as one status list. I'm going to copy the status file and paste it, and I'm going to rename it status list. I'm going to rename the class status list, and I'm going to delete the like function, delete the like state, and what this component is going to track is just the list of statuses. So I want to say this.state is equal to an object with statuses. And I want the statuses, instead of being inside this application, app.js, I want to cut those out from here and put them all in here. So the goal is that we're having one component which is responsible for showing the statuses, and those statuses are going to be shown just as an array of strings. And here's where the magic comes in for that. We want to use the built-in JavaScript array method map to map every single one of these strings to a component that displays the string as an actual status. So I'm actually going to return this.state.statuses.map, and I'm going to take every single state from there and return the status. So this.state.statuses is an array, and it's an array of strings. And we're mapping that entire array to get each string individually. I'm going to change this, instead of saying state, I'm going to say status. In fact, I'm going to call it status text. And we're going to pass the status text individually into the status component and finally return it. And I need to refactor this a little bit. Instead of importing status in the application, I need to import that in the status list. And since the status list is in the same directory as the status, well, we don't need the components directory anymore. And back in the application, we can actually import the entire status list. And finally, our application just went dark because we're not actually rendering the status list. So we need to make sure that we are rendering it itself. So look how much simpler our application has become. Our main application imports the status list, and we simply render it. Now, inside the status list, we have one component which its state is comprised of the different statuses in the entire list. We use the built-in array function map to map over that list of statuses and receive each string and call it status text. Now we return the status component and pass in that status text as a property. So now we have a clear delineation between the overall structure of our application, which right now is actually very simple. Our application just shows a list of statuses. The status list is responsible for keeping track of the statuses. And now the status component is responsible for rendering and keeping manage of the state for every individual status. And we have the like function, which will manipulate the status of the state of each of these statuses. So the next thing that we're going to do is see how we can interact with these things to modify the statuses, maybe add a new status, and probably delete statuses as well. But this is a very common pattern for most React applications. We have a main application, which defines at a very high level what our application does. We have a component that's dedicated to showing a list of things. And we have a component that is responsible just for defining how each of those things looks, the state of each of those things, and how we can interact and manipulate each of those things. Welcome back. So the last time we stopped, we had just created the status component and rendered these 4 different statuses in our application by creating our own property and passing a string to the component. Today we're going to look at how to lift the state out of just passing it into properties and figure out how to iterate through a list of these statuses from an array and map through them and display it in the application like that. So we're trying to move this string data out from these properties and just maintain one array in our application. The first thing we're going to do for this is actually move this status component to its own file. So I'm going to make a new directory in the source folder, and I'm going to call it components. So as our applications grow more complex, we want to not have all of our code exist in one file. So this file right here, our main app.js file, is actually starting to become large. So I'm going to address that by bringing just this status component out, and I'm going to move it to its own file, and then we're going to import the status component back into the application.js. Breaking our application up into different files is going to help us reason about our application, and it's also going to make it easier for us to collaborate with other people while we help develop the application. Once we start using a source control system like Git, it's going to be nice that different members of our team, if they're working on different parts of the application, it'll be nice that they're editing completely different files as opposed to all working on one super large file. That'll actually save us a lot of merge conflicts. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new file in components, and I'm going to call it status.js. And I'm going to go back to, and I'm going to select the status component and cut it from here and paste it over here. Now, we're also going to want to copy the import React line because this file also needs access to the component, and it actually also needs access to React as well. Notice that the editor has grayed out the word status itself because our editor doesn't think we're using this anywhere. So let's go ahead and move back to the application and add another import statement. Let's import from the components directory the status file that we just created. So we're also going to need to give this a name. We're going to have to copy the pattern we had up here. We want to give this thing a name. Because we're using it down here, we want to be able to say import status from this file. Notice that as soon as I saved that, we got an error message, failed to compile. And it says that there was an import error, and it says that component/status does not contain a default export. Well, that's true. For anyone that's new to importing and exporting things via this way in JavaScript, we actually need to define what to export. So here, I'm going to say exports default this class. Let's see if that works. Trying to sorry for the typos there. Export default this class. So you can actually export many things from a file, and if you combine the word export and default, we're actually by default exporting this entire class. So now we have the status in its own file, and we're still able to refer to it in the application.